Recording now.
Oh, come.
Welcome to Expert Views on ADR Ever, a podcast about simplifying the traditional African method of settling disputes or the appropriate dispute resolution ADR in a bid to attract more users to settle their disputes or conflicts with mediation, arbitration, collaborative law, restorative justice, negotiation, conciliation, and early neutral evaluation. My name is DrChinweEgbunike, postdoctoral fellow at the University of Brighton, United Kingdom. I'm the fellow of the American Bar Association section of dispute resolution. I'm delighted to welcome renowned ADR experts that built up the world's leading mediation website and organization, mediate.com, to the EVA show. Professor Clare Fowler. She is the president of Fowler Mediation, a practicing workplace mediator, and the vice president of mediate.com. Colin, he is the president and CEO of ODR.com, mediate.com, and arbitrate.com. He is the 2023 recipient of the Dolin Bear Waving Award from the American Bar Association Dispute Resolution Section. Dr. Dolin, he is the Chief Innovation Officer for ODR.com. He is a lecturer on law at Harvard Law School. There were so many hats. I've left the link to your profiles below. Let me stop sharing. And welcome to the show, everyone.
Thank you, Chinwe.
Thank you.
You all in one place at the same time. I'm so grateful.
Us too.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's your new book, Claire. Congrats.
There's a new book. Amazing. Yes, she's too modest to do it, so I'll do it for her. You should buy that book. All mediators should buy that book. It's an incredible contribution to the field.
Oh, thank you.
I would get one. I would get a copy. So without further ado, so what is the concept behind mediate.com? So the first 4 questions should be for Colin and Claire.
Sure. Well, I don't know, Claire, you want to go first?
I'd love to. So over 2.5 decades ago, Jim Malum, John Healy, Colin Rule came up with an idea of they wanted to support mediators by taking advantage of the technology that was available. And I believe that's really been the guiding force for mediate.com. How can we support mediators? How can we help them to receive the correct training, to make sure that they can market themselves, to make sure that they are connected in the right circles, that the right people are hearing about them? And so while you're right, Chinwe, we do wear a lot of hats at mediate.com. I think that's still the North Star, right? How can we support peacemakers, whether they're ombuds or arbitrators or mediators? But it's still, we all believe pretty strongly in the work that that mediators are doing, and we want to be able to support them in whatever way possible.
Okay.
That's great. Claire nailed it. But I would just say, we're honored to be able to support the work of mediators in every corner of the world. I mean, Chinwe, I love the description you had of all the different types of dispute resolution practice, and we're inspired every day reading about the great work that everyone's doing. So it's a wonderful place to be the hub where a lot of these professionals and passionate people come together. And I think that mediate.com has sort of become the beating heart of the field. And Claire is the beating heart of mediate.com. So,
That's so good to hear. How about them arbitrate.com and ODR.com? So, is it part of mediate.com?
Yeah, I'll talk to that. So, Arbitrate is a newer site. So my expertise has been in online dispute resolution. That's what I've done since I left mediate.com, back in 2000. So online dispute resolution, the use of technology to help people resolve their disputes, is growing rapidly all over the world. And I know your podcast is very focused on Africa. My good friend Morenike in Lagos runs ODRAfrica.com, and there's a lot that's happening there with the Kilimaya Center, but it's not just there. I mean, we have Mohammed Wahab in Egypt, we have friends in Kenya at ODR Kenya, we have friends in South Africa. So the use of technology to help people resolve their disputes has been growing really rapidly. But a big area of that, it's not just facilitative dispute resolution like mediation, it's also evaluative dispute resolution like arbitration. So we started arbitrate.com also sort of as a sister site to mediate.com to focus on the arbitration field, because we feel like they're kind of the yin and yang of dispute resolution. So, and then we launched odr.com, which we aspire to be the operating system for dispute resolution around the world. And that's a platform that can help mediators and arbitrators and negotiators resolve their disputes online and manage their case volumes. So we want to be the digital toolbox for all dispute resolution professionals. And I think across mediate.com, we also have ombuds.org, because we're big supporters of the ombuds field. So those are our big sites within what we call the RIS family.
Oh, okay, thank you so very much, Colin. So what were the major obstacles or challenges faced at the inception of mediate.com?
Well, I can talk about the early days, and Claire can talk about the more recent decades. I think when the internet first arose, there was a whole discussion. So I was involved. John Healy, one of the founders of mediate.com, started a website called ConflictNet, which was sort of before the internet, sort of an online bulletin board, where practitioners could dial in. But the question was, well, how can we create a repository of resources that could help people around the world, build their dispute resolution skills and also expand the network that supports the field? So John did that at ConflictNet. I mean, we had a couple hundred people. Really, it was because he was too lazy to drive across a bridge in San Francisco to go get some mediation materials from another organization. So he said, hey, why don't we do this over a modem? And that was really the seed that grew into the forest that is mediate.com. So now we have thousands and thousands of articles. We have thousands of hours of video. We've done, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of events, online webinars and conferences. I think that's kind of where it came from, is how can we build a home, sort of a portal for mediators on the web, and that's what it was in the early days. But Claire, what about the more recent decades?
Yeah, good question. I think the more recent decades, some of the struggles that we've seen are, first off, people becoming comfortable with technology, right? And I think that's just an issue that we're always going to face, because if it's, and I think mediators, and especially ombuds, this is a particularly important challenge, because it's not like we're just ordering a red sweater online, right? We're holding our parties and our visitors confidential information, and that's and a lot of the agreements that we create, they're incredibly confidential, right? They're holding people's personal information. And so it's understandable that mediators and ombuds and arbitrators have to be a little hesitant to accept technology, right? They have to make sure that this is going to safeguard their party's information. And so I think a lot of the work that we've had to do at mediate.com is test everything out, right? Try to break it, try to see where any potential weak parts are in the security before we can really stand up and advocate for this technology with our clients. The other difficulty that we face is something that mediators around the world face, is simply, how do you connect up the peacemaker with the people that need them? And I think this is just a constant challenge, where we have to always be innovative. We have to always think of, okay, what's a new way where we can get in front of people? Because there's no shortage of conflict, right? There's always going to be people that need help. It's how can we get the right people in front of them at the right time?
Oh, thank you so much, Claire. So what was the state of ADR at the time when you, was it that there was a buy-in for ADR, hence you created mediate.com, or, it wasn't accepted yet? So what was the history sort of about ADR at the time?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that, and maybe Claire can pipe in too. And we got to bring Ron in to talk about what's coming next, because he's our expert in terms of AI and everything that's coming around the bend. I will say, dispute resolution is timeless. He's looking over the horizon.
I agree.
I've actually seen, I think they have cuneiform tablets from ancient Sumeria, where people are talking about disputes, and how to resolve them over copper ingots. I've seen arbitration awards from, the 10th century in what is now England, of people arguing about, whose sheep can graze on what land. So, disputes have been around for as long as humans have been around, and they will always be around. But at least in the United States, the more formal dispute resolution field, I think, really it started in the 1910s and 1920s, when there was a big movement to use arbitration to resolve labor disputes. And for 50 years after that, really, it was focused on labor management issues. But then in the 70s, there was a community mediation movement that cropped up that was looking for alternatives to resolve disputes, to keep cases outside of court. And again, I'll say, if you look around the world, there have been long traditions in almost every geography about finding ways for people to resolve their disputes without resorting to formal mechanisms. But in the United States, that community mediation movement really gelled. And in the 70s, it turned into a big movement to expand access to justice through the use of what was then termed alternative dispute resolution, or ADR. So we saw a huge rise in the use of mediation to resolve family disputes. We saw a lot of courts implementing dispute resolution into their resolution procedures. So I think, I got involved in the field in the 80s. So I felt like I was standing on the shoulders of all of these pioneers. There's a famous book called Getting the Yes in the United States that came out of Harvard's program on negotiation. Bill Urey and Roger Fisher and Bruce Patton. There it is right there, sort of and it's a very thin book. I mean, you could buy it in the airport and read it on a flight. But there's a lot of really great stuff in there that changed the way that people thought about dispute resolution. So I think we're still, again, each of us are handed the torch. I think, Claire and Ron and I, before I put my background on, I have a picture of Roger Fisher on the wall, who, created the idea of the multi-door courthouse. Not Roger Fisher, I'm sorry, Frank Sander. But Roger and Frank were good friends. Yeah. So, so I think, again, we inherited the fields that were created by some of these visionaries, but at that point it was a movement. And by the time we got involved, it was pretty well established. Most law schools had courses on dispute resolution. There were a lot of community mediation programs around that. Straight out of college, I got a job at the National Institute for Dispute Resolution, which was set up in, as part of this movement. So, we're very lucky to have all that progress to build on. But now what's exciting is, obviously, society is digitizing and the world is flattening, and we can use the tools of technology. And I think Frank Sander, he would not have imagined all the things that we can do now with artificial intelligence and mediate.com and things like that. So, Claire, what did I leave out?
Oh, nothing. I think it is important to talk about COVID, though, and how much that has changed everything and changed the acceptance of mediation. Colin's right. When mediate.com was initially founded, the community mediation movement was really taking off, right? Because there were a lot of people that needed help resolving the barking dog dispute or the landlord-tenant dispute. And so we saw a lot of that level of disputes were being resolved with community mediation centers. And then we saw a lot of really high-level disputes being resolved with arbitration firms, a lot of larger construction disputes, and a lot of the larger stuff was being resolved at that high level, because a lot of the larger firms were realizing, oh my goodness, if we resolve it through these alternative mechanisms, it saves so much time, it saves so much money, and it can restore relationships. And I think it was really during COVID that middle layer of disputes that people were realizing, I have a dispute that normally I would have gone to the courthouse to resolve, but now I can resolve it Saturday morning in my living room online. And so I really think that right, we saw the lower level, like the grassroots level of disputes, we already had an answer for that. A lot of the high level disputes, we had an answer for that, but we were still, it was still hard to get acceptance for a lot of that middle layer of disputes. And I think we saw that change with COVID. So. And hear from Ron where he thinks we're going next.
It's been fun. It's been fun bringing Ron up. Ron, is a technology pioneer here in Silicon Valley, and he's obviously taught at Harvard. He taught at Stanford. He wrote a book on legal informatics. So he's one of the leading minds in legal tech. But it's been great to bring Ron into the fold, and he's just done his mediation training and his arbitration training, and now he's learning more about dispute systems design. So he comes at it with a much fresher perspective. So I'm eager to hear what Ron thinks about all this too.
So, Ron,
That
what do you
sounds like an
think?
opening. Yeah, okay. I think from the technology perspective, we always have to worry about how injecting efficiency can hurt quality. And so a lot of the discussions that we have has to do with the way that we measure the quality of any dispute resolution mechanism. And when you're looking to do that with technology, it leads you to measure the outcomes when it's human-based. So that has, and what's interesting as we're looking to apply some of the aspects of artificial intelligence tools that are out there is that there's very, very different types of mechanisms of resolving disputes, and that they map to different types of artificial intelligence. So, if you're doing e-commerce and you have a couple like, oh, this didn't come on time or it came broken, then you're usually looking at something like a decision tree or checklist, and it's pretty close to what you might call expert system and a set of rules. And that's very different than the machine learning techniques that look at how you might measure outcomes or help decide on settlement ranges. And that's still very different from what we would call procedural fairness, where people are simply caring about feeling heard. But in that case, we want to measure the degree to which we feel like, how are we getting to empathy? How are we feeling like whether there's if it's evaluative, how do we feel like the neutral is really hearing both sides? And when it's a mediation, we want to make sure that people are hearing each other. So are there tools that we can use to facilitate that within any of the efficiency mechanisms that we can then correlate to some sort of measurable metric to help make sure that we are not degrading the quality of that process? So that's quite a challenge. It takes the mapping of technology to a deeper understanding of what is the technology doing and what is the mechanisms that we're looking for. And the measurement aspect of it, when I looked over the quality metrics that were listed in from online dispute resolution, because Colin has worked, and I assume Claire, but I didn't ask, to come up with some of these, Colin laughs at me because I say they're fluffy. And the reason is they're aspirational. And at the end of the day, what we need to do is turn those aspirational goals of any dispute resolution system into some form of measurable quantity that we want to make sure as we're doing all of these disputes, whether it's whoever owns that neutral, whether it's in a closed system like an eBay or whether that is out in the open, whether we're supporting courts, we want to make sure that all of these technologies are always giving us at least a minimal quality of outcome. So there's my spiel.
Oh, thank you.
And I would say that my standard quote on this is, if all we cared about was efficiency, we would resolve disputes with a coin toss.
Oh, this is an original contribution to knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, good.
Great insights on technology and the utilization of settling of disputes in via ADR. So I think this needs to be researched on further, so thank you so very much for sharing on this show. So the famous question is, how far has ADR enhanced access to justice in the US?
Well, that's a great question. There are lots of studies on that. And, I'm very involved with the studies around how ODR has expanded access to justice, and I remain very optimistic there. But we've run many, many articles on mediate.com, and, many of the journals focused on dispute resolution have studied that, how has alternative dispute resolution expanded access to justice. In the United States, we have what are called legal service bureaus. And they are organizations devoted to extending legal support to low-income people, usually people that can't afford access to lawyers on their own. And I think it's telling, because I've been to the Legal Services Corporation conference several times, that many of these legal service bureaus have embraced alternative dispute resolution, because they find that it's, as we said, it may be cheaper, it may be faster, but it's also very high quality, and it preserves relationships, which can be so important, particularly in family disputes or workplace disputes. So you know, people who are devoted to expanding access to justice to as many people as it can be expanded to, I think have learned that dispute resolution can be a very, very powerful way for them to do that, even with limited resources, because the judicial model for resolving disputes is very resource intensive, and lawyers can be very expensive. And we're seeing legal, like judiciary budgets continually cut in the United States. They're shrinking and shrinking, but the need for legal services is growing. So, you know, it's a tricky thing to figure out how can you add that up? How can you continue to deliver services? And I think in particular on the civil side, obviously the criminal side is a different ball of wax, because you're talking about people's life and death. I have a good friend, Ben Barton, who's a law professor in Kentucky, and he wrote a book that essentially said, let's use as much technology as we can to get as much efficiency as we can on the civil side of the judiciary. And that's dispute resolution and arbitration and mediation, negotiation, restorative justice. And let's take all of that money that we saved and then let's spend it on the criminal side. Because currently on the criminal side, we are not living up to our obligations in terms of providing adequate counsel and representation to people who are accused of crimes. So, you know, I'm not advocating for taking any more money out of the justice system, but I do think that there's a lot of inefficiency in the system. And because the law is kind of a monopoly, it's not incentivized to evolve as quickly as private sector companies who face competition. You know, if you're a private company, you have to continually up your game, because if you don't, your customers are going to go someplace else to somebody who's doing a better job. But that doesn't happen in the courts. There's only one court. So if you don't like small claims court, too bad. That's the only small claims court. So I think you know, I think there is an opportunity to use dispute resolution to envision a new justice system that significantly opens the doors of access. And it means that people can get fast and fair resolutions to their problems at a low cost. And they don't say, well, this is going to be too costly and too expensive and too time consuming and too much of a pain. So even though I'm entitled to a resolution, I'm not going to pursue it because the bar is just too high for me to clear.
Thank you so much, Colin. Claire, do you have anything to say?
I mean, that's a pretty open question. Careful. Always. So what I really like is, so I began working pretty heavily in the mediation industry like 25 years ago, and you just had to spend so much time doing all of the stuff to get to that moment where the magic happened, right? The sending back and forth of letters and typing it out and driving over to the post office to mail the thing. And that just took so much time. And what I really like is that now we've been able to incorporate so much technology that takes care of the admin stuff, so you can get to that moment where the magic happens faster. As an example, we're working with a dispute resolution center up in Washington. And I've been connected with them a little bit, and they let me step in and join one of their volunteer mediation moments. And it was great because they were using our directory, our case management system. And so there was all this technology that automated all of these processes. So they were able to help a lot more people, right? And so normally, before they were using technology, they were only able to help, I think it was like 100 youth going through the juvenile system in about a month. And then they started incorporating all of this stuff that sped up the admin. So now they were helping 500 people. And so I sat in because I was afraid of just what you were saying, Colin, that it had become so efficient that it didn't mean much anymore, right? And so I sat in this meeting, and it was this kid who had graffitied a business storefront, right? He had spray painted all over the front of it. And we had this moment where the store owner was there and the kid was there and his parents were there. And the store owner described how embarrassed he was and how humiliated he was at that moment when he came in the next morning and he saw the graffiti everywhere. And the kid heard it and he began to cry. And he said, I never thought about that. I'm so sorry. They came up with this beautiful plan where the kid was going to show up every Saturday morning for the next couple of months and clean it. And then he started doing his own designs, advertising the business, and then he became hired. And it was just, it's those moments.
Oh, wow.
This is why we do this. we want to automate all of the administrative stuff so we can get to those beautiful magical moments and have more of those, right? And spread more of that peace instead of constantly being weighed down and frustrated with the scheduling and the documents and all of that stuff, right? Let's automate all of that. Technology is there so that we can get to the actual peace moment.
Thank you so much, Claire, for sharing that. So what impact has your organization have on the utilization of ADR in the US and across the world as well? Because I think other ADR practitioners from different jurisdictions can be members of mediator.com. So
Absolutely. Well, I'll put in a little pitch here. You know, we love mediators. We want mediators to be part of mediate.com. As I said, we really feel a responsibility to drive the field forward. So we welcome all mediators to become either featured or premium members of mediate.com because it can help raise your profile. And we geo-tag all of the visitors to mediate.com. So if somebody comes from Nigeria, they will see the mediators from Nigeria on the website. So, but we do a lot to advance the practice of the field. Not only are we a repository, as I said, of all of this wisdom it's accumulated over the last 28 years, Claire and I do a lot of trainings. As we mentioned, when the pandemic hit, a lot of mediators, their whole business shut down because they only knew how to work face to face. So we were working around the clock doing trainings, getting people set up on Zoom and teaching them best practices and, trying to talk about some of the ethical dilemmas that emerge. Jim Malamed, who was one of our original founders, he led a big task force that went on for 6 months to think, okay, well, now that the field is online and a majority of mediations are happening over channels like this, over Zoom, what does that mean for mediation training? How do we need to evolve what we do in mediation training? And I think Claire is probably the #1 mediation trainer in the United States because she did it through Mediate University, which is one of our websites. She has a 40-hour mediation training, and people sign up for this 24/7. I mean, all over the world, people have taken Claire's mediation training, and that's their first exposure to mediation skills.
Signed up for it as well.
There you go. So it's great. And it's an amazing thing. I mean, there's only so many people you can train face to face. I mean, I think about the great trainers, but traveling around the world takes a lot of time. It's an amazing thing for Claire to put together this wonderful training locally there in Eugene, recording these sessions, put them on the internet. And now there are people taking this training from Korea and, from India and from Nigeria. So it's just an amazing thing that technology can expand access like that. So, we did a conference on AI and mediation just a few months ago, and I did a class on, how to learn how to use ODR tools. Claire is designing a conference in connection with her great new book on workplace mediation in the fall. She did another conference last year on mediation and mental health. So we have our ear to the ground, and we're trying to listen for what are the hot topics. It's not that we have all the answers, but what we do have is kind of a convening power, and we can ask our friends, the experts, to come in, and we can have these dialogues. And I really do think that's a key role in sort of facilitating the growth of the field. And we can no field can stay static, because society is changing all the time. So the way that we deliver our services has to evolve as well. And we're always trying to be on the leading edge of that. We're always trying to experiment with new tools, because it's not like you get it right out of the box every time. Sometimes you really have to try this and try that and evaluate and, bring a lot of people together, what works for you. And then we can distill these best practices. And I think, mediation in 50 years is not going to look like the mediation that we do today. But as I say, we stand on each other's shoulders, and, we move the ball ever forward. So hopefully we'll get closer and closer to that ideal of expanded access to justice and fast and fair resolutions for all.
This is what has been so fun about having Ron be a part of these conversations. Again, because Colin and I have been in the field for so long, like you just sort of adopt certain things, right? This is just the way you do things. And then Ron comes in and goes, but why? Why do we do them that way?
Ron hasn't drunk the Kool-Aid yet, like we have. So.
And it's been good. I think it's forced us to really reimagine a lot of our processes. Like, is this the best way to do things? What is the purpose behind this? I'm enjoying it.
Oh, thank you so much. So we have six minutes left. So Ron, this question is for you. So regarding mediate.com's web development, what innovation has been created or added to improve services since its inception?
Well, that that has to go back to Colin because he's been involved with it so much more than me. I think part of why they brought me in was, I think, a little more forward-looking. The injection of new tools like what we see with the language models is really complicated. So that's where my focus has been, to the degree that I can stay ahead of Colin, which is always a challenge. And I don't get nearly enough time with Claire, but the language models are really cutting to a lot of what we think about when we're talking about people working out their disputes, right? As opposed to some of the, like I say, the e-commerce stuff, which is a lot more push button and simple. When you're looking at family mediation, custody, if you're looking at a neighbor dispute, et cetera, there's a lot of personal feelings involved. There's a lot of people are feeling hurt, or they're wanting to assert their rights against somebody they feel wronged them. And this has a lot to do with listening to each other. It has a lot to do with language. So those are tougher tools to apply. And it takes more work to figure out how to do that than to use a machine learning algorithm with 10,000 prior similar cases to figure out ranges of settlement. So that's some of what we're looking at is appropriate use of these models to help people really at a deeper level of understanding each other, which is some of the magic that Claire is talking about. So how can we facilitate people understanding each other better? That is quite a goal. What I would say about this, which is really, I want to get back to this access issue.
Okay.
The market is so broken, and people can't afford to get their disputes resolved, as Colin was talking about. But they have some money, and if the market were adjusted to be appropriate, they can pay to get a resolution if we can provide them with a service that's much more affordable. So the goal, what I really like, I worked at Google for years, and I thought that their mission of trying to get information out to people would be very difficult to meet with a nonprofit. It really was the profitability of that service that allowed us to get so much information out to so many people as they wanted it. And I feel like in this case, the ability to ramp up dispute resolution requires the profitability, but not in a negative way, in sort of a market validation way, that we really are getting efficiency out. We're able to get people a resolution at a much more affordable cost, while we're maintaining the quality. I think we have the potential of doing a huge amount of good for people while being profitable, and the profitability and the market validation is really important to know that we're doing it right. So, I think early days in Google, when people would come in to try to work there because they wanted to make money on a startup, we weren't super interested. I did a search on my dissertation, and I've been interested in it since well before I ever got to Google, as Colin's talking about dispute resolution. And what we're looking for here is people that really want to try to resolve the access to justice problem, try to get more disputes resolved in a way that we feel good about. And I think that there's money to be made in terms of, market validation in the process. So I'm excited to try to ramp up that kind of financial component to it in a positive way.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so many opportunities. Chinwe, seriously, every one of our staff meetings, it's like Colin is a kid in a candy store. He's like, oh, there's this new company and they need help. Guys, can we help them? What do you think? Because you're right. There's a lot that's broken out there, Ron, but I think peacemakers are trying to get in there and help, right? We have the dispute resolution tools. We have the conflict resolution technology. I think it's our time to help.
So from a societal perspective, just I won't say this quick, where people are so afraid of AI. And from that perspective, my goal is to have AI working as hard as it can to resolve disputes, to start injecting all of the tools that we feel are missing, like some form of ethics or morality, some form of a mediation capability, a de-escalation capability, and to have that AI working as hard as possible as any negative aspects of other parts of AI. So I think that there's this alternate, incredibly positive result of the work that we're trying to accomplish here. So
okay, thank you. We just have one more minutes to go. Okay, so final question is, how safe and confidential are the practitioner's data? with media.com?
Well, extremely safe and secure. I will say there is. I used to have data security experts that I worked with at eBay and PayPal that said, "Well, we can make a 100% secure system. It's just we can't allow any users in."
Yeah.
So, I think it's kind of like Ron's coin flip. We want to maximize usability. We want to maximize access. We want to maximize flexibility and convenience of the tools, but we have to balance that with data security.
Exactly.
And as I said, there's no 100% secure system out there, but it does make me nervous that there are a lot of mediators who are just using openly available insecure tools. They're emailing confidential, sensitive information. They're using the kind of communication tools that just come installed by default on their phone because they're super convenient, but they've not really thought through the security or the confidentiality of those tools, even though we have a professional responsibility to take care of that for our parties. So one of the things we spend a lot of time talking about, and all three of us have done this with many dispute resolution organizations, is urging them to be a little more thoughtful about their data security. And we create tools, and we have a whole information security team that ensures that our tools are secure and that they're patched constantly and they're monitored. But so that's why we want to urge